There comes a moment in life when something quietly settles inside you, not like a thunderclap or a sudden burst of noise, but like a soft exhale you didn't even realize you were holding. It's the kind of moment that doesn't announce itself, but once it arrives, everything feels different. You stop bracing, you stop apologizing, you stop trying to become someone else. And instead, you finally arrive at yourself. That's where she is now. For a long time, her life revolved around appearance and expectation, around looking a certain way, carrying a certain image, and fitting into a version of herself that felt powerful to the outside world, but quietly exhausting on the inside. People saw confidence, glamour, and control. They saw success. What they didn't see was the pressure that came with it, the constant preparation, the unspoken rules, the endless awareness of being watched. When your life unfolds in front of cameras and opinions, it becomes easy to forget where performance ends and reality begins. She spent years transforming herself, often starting long before the day even began. Sitting in makeup chairs, surrounded by mirrors, lights, and hands adjusting every detail. Her children remember it well, sitting nearby, waiting, joking about how long it took for their mother to be ready. At the time, it all felt necessary, like protection, like armor, and in many ways it was. That image helped her navigate a world that rewards appearance before authenticity. It helped her survive, succeed, and create moments that would last far longer than anyone expected. She doesn't regret that chapter. When she looks back now, she doesn't just see costumes or characters, she sees connection. She sees how many people recognize themselves in the vulnerability beneath the surface. The mistakes, the longing, the joy, the heartbreak, the resilience. That's what made those characters endure. That's why they're remembered. Not because they were perfect, but because they were human. Beneath the surface, there was always emotion, always openness, always a reflection of real life. But with time and distance came clarity. She realized that the harshest voice she had been living with wasn't coming from the outside. It was her own. Once that realization settled in, everything began to shift. Slowly at first. Then completely. She stopped chasing perfection and started choosing freedom. Freedom in how she looks, freedom in how she lives, freedom in how she expresses herself. She no longer tries to match an idealized version of herself. She simply shows up as she is, day after day. And strangely, that's when everything began to align. She began to see her life differently, not as something to control, but as something to experience. Almost like a film unfolding in real time. She stopped worrying about being the most admired person in the room and started enjoying being a character in her own story. A character allowed to change, to experiment, to evolve. Some days she feels light and playful. Other days she feels like she's standing in between chapters, catching her reflection and thinking, who is that? And instead of discomfort, she feels curiosity, even excitement. Change no longer scares her. It energizes her. Makeup and fashion are no longer obligations. They're choices. Tools, forms of expression. Sometimes she uses them, sometimes she doesn't. Beauty, for her now, is not about hiding or correcting. It's about complementing who she already is. She no longer compares herself to impossible standards or filtered versions of reality. She doesn't compete, she doesn't chase, she simply exists. And that quiet confidence is impossible to ignore. People feel it. Women come to her with their daughters and thank her, not for advice, but for example. For showing that it's possible to feel comfortable in your own skin, even in a world obsessed with perfection. For opening conversations about self-image, comparison, and the pressure to constantly curate an identity. In a time when everyone feels watched and judged, her message lands gently but deeply. You are already enough. She doesn't preach it, she lives it. Even in spaces where comparison feels unavoidable, she chooses presence over performance. Experience over competition, meaning over measurement. And somehow, that choice draws more attention than trying ever did. Because authenticity has a gravity of its own. What most people don't realize is how much courage this stage of life requires. It takes bravery to step away from what once worked, to loosen the armor that once protected you, to allow yourself to be seen without filters or expectations. Vulnerability, after years of control, feels like stepping into open air. But it's also where connection lives. People don't connect to perfection. They connect to truth. That truth is now reflected in her work. She finally has space to explore roles that challenge her and stretch her emotionally. to dig into characters with depth, complexity, and contradictions. Each project feels like uncovering another layer of herself, like healing a different part of her story. She approaches every role with focus and discipline, fully present, aware that every opportunity matters. Even now, she works with the intensity of someone who knows how rare these moments can be, and how grateful she is to experience them. Recognition from peers feels different now. Not louder, not overwhelming, just meaningful. Not because she needs approval, but because it confirms what she's always known, that she belongs, that she has more to give, and that her journey didn't stop at one chapter. It evolved. Compliments no longer define her, but they do remind her that growth is visible. And despite the busy schedule, the creative momentum, and the renewed excitement, she still finds comfort in simplicity. In quiet mornings, in time spent with family, in moments away from noise and expectation. Life now includes space to reflect, to rest, to enjoy. She once thought she had reached the end of the road, that it was time to step back, slow down, and live quietly. But instead, life surprised her. Not with pressure, but with possibility. Now she welcomes uncertainty. She's made peace with not knowing what comes next. She understands that control is an illusion, and presence is the real power. Happiness doesn't need to be loud to be real. Sometimes choosing joy, softly, intentionally, is the most courageous decision of all. She remains romantic about life, curious, open, engaged, and that openness is what makes this chapter feel so alive. This isn't about reclaiming fame. It's about reclaiming self. It's about forgiving the younger version of yourself for worrying too much, for following trends, for measuring worth through outside approval. It's about choosing freedom over fear, about deciding that you don't need to resemble anyone else to be valuable. She doesn't want to look like an idea. She wants to look like herself. And in that choice, something powerful happens. Because confidence doesn't come from being admired, it comes from acceptance. From knowing who you are and standing comfortably in that truth. When you see yourself clearly, without judgment, without apology, the world responds differently. Not because you demand attention, but because authenticity draws it naturally. She wants to live fully, to create freely, to explore new chapters with curiosity instead of fear. To love deeply, to return to simple pleasures that ground her, even as her life continues to expand. She has learned that life is not about maintaining an image, it's about telling a story worth living. One moment at a time, this is a story of growth, of resilience, of quiet transformation. A reminder that life can feel cinematic not because it's perfect, but because it's real. She has stepped into a new kind of freedom, and by doing so, she invites others to do the same. To stop comparing, to stop striving for impossible ideals, to choose presence, joy, and self-acceptance. She doesn't want to be anyone else. She wants to be herself, fully, honestly, unapologetically. And in that choice lies the most enduring beauty of all. If you enjoyed spending this time with us, subscribe to Fame Insights for more stories that go deeper than appearances.